Once upon a time, in the vibrant, ever-awake city of Lagos, where the air buzzed with ambition and the streets glimmered with dreams, lived a woman named Chama, admired by many and envied by more, a strong, elegant, and disciplined businesswoman who had risen from humble beginnings to own 3 flourishing women's clothing boutiques that were known for style, class, and quality. And to the outside world her life appeared flawless, because Chama was not only successful in business but also happily married to a man named Ika, a calm, handsome, and hard-working man whose gentle nature made people call him the ideal husband. And together they had built what seemed like the perfect family, blessed with 2 beautiful children, Chidi, a bright 7-year-old boy full of questions and curiosity, and Ada, a sweet 4-year-old girl whose laughter filled every corner of their home. And for 8 solid years, Chama and Ika's marriage was admired by friends, relatives, church members, and even strangers, because they rarely argued, never embarrassed each other in public, and always supported one another's dreams. So much so that Chama would often smile proudly and say, "I am the luckiest woman alive. My husband is faithful, hard-working, and loves his family with all his heart, and truly life treated them kindly." As they lived in a beautiful house in Lekki, owned 2 cars, and could afford the best education for their children, enjoying the comfort many only prayed for. Yet beneath the polished surface of success and happiness, a silent struggle was already growing unnoticed, because as Chama's business expanded rapidly, demanding more of her time, energy, and attention, she slowly became trapped in a routine that left no space for rest, peace, or even herself, waking every day before dawn to prepare meals, dress the children, rush them to school, and then spend long, exhausting hours managing staff, handling customers, resolving conflicts, and overseeing operations across 3 boutiques, only to return home drained but still burdened with cooking, cleaning, laundry, homework, and marital duties, leaving her body tired and her spirit stretched thin. And although she loved her family deeply, the weight of responsibility rested heavily on her shoulders, until one evening she collapsed onto the couch, her body aching and refusing to move. And it was then that Ika, alarmed by the sight of his once energetic wife reduced to exhaustion, held her hand gently and told her the truth she had been avoiding, that she could not continue this way without breaking. And when he suggested hiring a housemaid to help with the home, Chama hesitated, haunted by stories of betrayal and distrust. Yet desperation weakened her fear. A decision that felt small and practical at the time, but was quietly opening the door to a storm she could never have imagined. Challenge her strength and redefine her understanding of trust, loyalty, and forgiveness. And as the city of Lagos continued its restless dance of progress and opportunity, the perfect life Chama cherished stood unknowingly at the edge of a dangerous turning point, where one choice would invite a stranger into her home and slowly unravel everything she believed was unbreakable. The search for help began quietly but carried the weight of Chama's exhaustion, as she asked friends, neighbors, and church members if they knew any trustworthy housemaid, hoping to find someone who could bring relief rather than trouble. Yet every interview left her disappointed, and a few clearly uninterested in responsibility, till just as Chama was losing hope, her close friend Mrs. Okafor called with excitement in her voice and promised she had found the perfect solution. A young woman named Blessing from her village, described as respectful, hard-working, and God-fearing. A recommendation that softened Chama's doubts because trust carried more weight when it came from someone familiar. And when Blessing arrived that evening, standing at the doorway in a simple dress, with her hair neatly packed and her eyes lowered in humility, Chama felt an instant sense of comfort, mistaking gentleness for innocence. And during the interview, Blessing spoke softly about her background, her village roots, her love for children, and her desperate need to support her sick mother after her father's death. A story that touched Chama deeply and made her believe she was offering not just employment but hope. And so, with relief mixed with caution, Chama welcomed Blessing into her home, agreed on her duties and salary, and believed she had finally found balance. Because from the very first days, Blessing performed her tasks with impressive dedication, waking early to prepare meals, cleaning until the house shone, cooking rich African dishes that pleased the family, and caring for the children with playful warmth that quickly won their affection, creating an atmosphere of peace that allowed Chama to breathe again and focus on her growing business without guilt. Yet, while Chama saw a hard-working helper restoring order to her life, she failed to notice the subtle observations happening behind Blessing's gentle smiles, the quiet calculations made while watching the rhythms of the household, the moments spent studying Chama's absence, Ika's kindness, and the fragile spaces where trust lived. Because sometimes danger does not announce itself with noise or aggression, but arrives quietly, wrapped in humility, obedience, and carefully rehearsed innocence. And as weeks turned into months, the house that once felt overwhelmed by chaos now felt calm. Something patient and deliberate, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true purpose. For a long while, everything seemed peaceful, almost too perfect. As Blessing settled into the household and performed her duties with such precision that Chama began to believe her prayers had been answered, because the house stayed clean. The meals were always ready, the children laughed more, and for the first time in years, Chama felt her body rest and her mind quiet, allowing her to pour energy into her boutiques without constantly worrying about what awaited her at home. Yet comfort has a way of lowering one's guard, and slowly, quietly, the first signs of trouble slipped through unnoticed. Beginning one evening when Chama returned home earlier than usual and found Blessing standing before the mirror in the living room wearing one of her red dresses, a dress bought with pride and meant for special moments. And though shock flashed across Chama's face, Blessing's quick apology and innocent tears softened her anger, making Chama excuse the behavior as curiosity rather than disrespect. But unease lingered like a whisper in the back of her mind, growing louder weeks later when Blessing's appearance began to change. As simple village dresses were replaced with fitted jeans, styled hair, makeup, and confidence that did not match her claimed circumstances. And although Blessing explained these changes as gifts from church members, the explanation failed to sit comfortably in Chama's heart, especially when she noticed how Blessing's attention began shifting from household duties to Ika himself. lingering too long in the living room when he watched television, appearing suddenly wherever he stood, and watching him with eyes that held admiration rather than respect. And when Chama confronted her husband gently, hoping to share her growing discomfort, Ika dismissed her concerns as imagination and jealousy, insisting Blessing was only being hard-working, a response that made Chama question her instincts and swallow her fears. Yet unease refused to fade, because intuition often sees what the eyes want to ignore. And with every passing day, Ika spent more time at home, lingering in shared spaces instead of retreating to his study, while Blessing seemed to orbit him like a shadow, polite but persistent, subtle but intentional, creating a tension Chama could feel but could not yet prove. And as nights grew restless and doubts filled Chama's thoughts, the invisible cracks in her perfect life widened silently, preparing the ground for a revelation that would shatter trust beyond repair and expose the true cost of ignoring warning signs disguised as kindness. The fragile balance of Chama's world collapsed on a Friday afternoon that began like any other. Because she had gone to her boutique expecting a long day of work, unaware that fate had already rearranged her schedule. And when the shipment arrived earlier than planned, she finished quickly and decided to surprise her family by returning home early, a decision that would carve a permanent scar into her heart. Because, as her car rolled into the compound, she noticed Ika's vehicle parked carelessly in its usual spot, even though he was supposed to be at work. And in that instant, her chest tightened and her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Yet she forced herself to stay calm as she unlocked the door quietly and stepped into a house that felt unnaturally silent. A silence so heavy it pressed against her ears. And when she searched the living room and kitchen and found no one, her heart began to pound violently as faint laughter drifted from upstairs. A woman's laughter she recognized instantly, and with trembling legs and shaking hands, she climbed the stairs toward her bedroom, each step heavier than the last, until she heard her husband's voice speaking words that should never have been spoken, praising another woman's beauty and confessing desire without shame. And in that moment, denial shattered completely as reality crashed into her soul. Because this was not suspicion or imagination, but betrayal unfolding in real time. And when Chama pushed open the bedroom door, what she saw destroyed everything she believed about love, trust, and loyalty, as her husband stood too close to Blessing on the bed she once called sacred, their bodies almost bare, their expressions frozen in guilt and fear. And rage exploded within Chama as pain poured from her like fire, her screams filling the room as disbelief turned into heartbreak. And when Blessing tried to flee with false tears and apologies, Chama's anger took control, her hands shaking as she slapped the girl who had eaten her food, worn her clothes, slept under her roof, and plotted her downfall. While Ika's weak attempts to defend and explain only deepened the wound. Because silence from a guilty man speaks louder than any confession. And when Blessing finally revealed her true face, confessing her wicked intentions without remorse, Chama's spirit shattered completely, realizing that the stranger she welcomed with kindness had entered her home with a calculated plan to steal her life, her marriage, and her dignity. And as Blessing walked out with venomous words echoing behind her, Chama stood broken in her own bedroom, knowing with unbearable clarity that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The days that followed felt unreal to Chama, as though her life had cracked into pieces that no longer fit together. Because once Blessing was thrown out of the house, the silence she left behind screamed louder than her wicked confession. Crying until her body ached, refusing food, avoiding sleep, and recoiling from Ika's presence as though his touch could burn her. Because betrayal committed within one's own home cuts deeper than any wound inflicted by strangers. And although Ika begged relentlessly for forgiveness, insisting it was a moment of weakness fueled by loneliness and temptation, Chama could hear nothing beyond the echo of his disloyalty, especially as her children's innocent questions pierced her heart, forcing her to mask tears with forced smiles while her soul bled quietly. Yet the truth about Blessing did not end with her expulsion, because a phone call from Mrs. Okafor reopened the wound while also revealing a terrifying reality. As Chama learned that the girl she trusted had destroyed other families before, moving from house to house with practiced innocence, seducing husbands, collecting money, and vanishing when her mission was complete. A revelation that transformed Chama's grief into burning anger, and determined not to let another family suffer the same fate. She hired a private investigator whose findings were even more shocking, uncovering that Blessing's real name was Charity, her tragic past was fabricated, and her actions were part of a calculated scheme run alongside a boyfriend who benefited from her deception. And armed with evidence, Chama found strength she did not know she possessed and reported the case to the police, watching as the law finally caught up with the woman who nearly destroyed her life. And when Blessing stood in court, stripped of lies and fake innocence, the judge's sentence echoed justice long overdue, condemning her manipulation and cruelty while delivering a punishment meant to protect others. Yet, even as the courtroom doors closed behind Blessing, Chama knew that justice could not undo the damage done within her marriage. Because while the enemy from outside was removed, the betrayal from within still lingered, leaving Chama at a painful crossroads where anger battled love, trust wrestled with memory, and the future of her family rested on a decision she was not yet ready to make. In the quiet weeks after justice was served, Chama faced the hardest battle of her life, not with an enemy outside her home, but with the storm raging inside her heart. Because although Blessing was gone and could no longer harm anyone, the scars she left behind remained deeply carved into Chama's marriage, her self-worth, and her sense of safety. And while Ika continued to beg for forgiveness with tears and remorse, admitting his weakness and accepting responsibility for his actions, Chama struggled to imagine how trust could ever be rebuilt after being shattered so completely. Yet guided by counseling, prayer, and the love she had for her children, she slowly began to understand that forgiveness was not a reward for betrayal, but a release from the heavy chains of bitterness that threatened to consume her. And after many nights of reflection and painful conversations, Chama made the difficult decision to forgive Ika, not because the betrayal was acceptable, but because she refused to allow anger to define the rest of her life, setting firm boundaries and demanding accountability as the foundation of any possible healing. And over time, Ika proved his commitment through consistent actions rather than words, becoming more present, more supportive, and more patient, understanding that rebuilding trust was a long journey without shortcuts. And although healing took years, and memories of pain still surfaced at unexpected moments, the family slowly found stability again, emerging wiser and stronger than before. And as Chama watched her children grow in a home preserved by hard choices and resilience, she came to accept that life's deepest wounds can also become its greatest teachers, leaving behind a powerful lesson that echoed far beyond her story, that trust must be guarded carefully, that appearances can deceive, and that not everyone who enters your life comes with good intentions, because some arrive smiling while carrying destruction in their hearts. And so the tale of Chama stands as a warning and a reminder that vigilance, wisdom, and balance are essential in protecting love. Trust demands not only forgiveness but time, truth, and unwavering effort to heal.